Thank you very much, Ngozi. I did say 14 too yesterday, but it's actually 15 years. All right? So this is our 15th year doing this. First of all, I'd like to thank all our viewers and also our great speakers who will be thrashing out the matter, a very important matter in our national discourse this morning. But I'd just like to, in opening day, say a few words about the platform, about the vision, its inception, and where we believe we are taking this to. Like we said, this is our 15th year to date. We started on the 1st of May, 2007 at Excusez-moi, and we had probably about 2,000 people gathered there. We did not think in any way, I've said this at the platform event in the past, we didn't think in any way it was going to grow beyond something where probably about just 5,000 people will begin to or will be attending. But within the space of about 12 months, we were actually turning away people in large numbers. So we decided to move it to the Tafawa Balewa Square. What we were essentially doing during that time, 1st of May, was that we conceived it as a way to celebrate Labor Day, the 1st of May, and to teach principles that will produce effective workers in the Nigerian economic or in the Nigerian system. So we emphasized concepts of entrepreneurship and how people will be diligent as work. As we progressed, we moved into the Tafawa Balewa Square. It grew to about 20,000 people in attendance. This had no television coverage at this point in time. So what happened was we had international guests, people who come in and speak. Then came 2010, which was Nigeria's 50th anniversary. And we were told by the then government that they were going to celebrate the 50th independence of Nigeria at the place where power was given to Nigeria, which was at Tafawa Balewa Square. So we felt there was no place that could contain the crowds we were having, and so we decided to cancel doing the platform for that year. 2 weeks to it, I sat with some of the people that we organize it, and then we conceived the idea of making it a media event. So we thought that it's very simple. We can get a hall, have 200 people there, and then beam it to thousands of people all over the nation and all over the world. So we decided to do it that way, and that's when we came on television. But at some point, and I want to emphasize something, and this is what I came to say this morning, at some point, what happened was it began to evolve, not by any plan of ours, consciously, but people started addressing national issues and exchanging ideas in the public space on how to move the nation forward. When this began to happen, because it was conceived first as something purely for entrepreneurship, I remember when we began to pivot into this national discourse, a member of this church, who is a faithful member of this church, in fact, he's the one that gave me these notepads I used to preach all my messages, walked up to me and said, and he's quite close to me, he said the emphasis of the platform is shifting. That I used to come to the platform, these were his words. He said, to get ideas on my business. I learned about accounting and all of that from the seminars or the sessions of people. He said, now it is becoming policy-oriented. And he said to me, why is it moving in this direction? And he was concerned. And I said to him this, that if we don't address and speak to the bigger picture of what is going on in the country, which are issues of governance and our national polity. I explained to him that since we got on television, what had happened was the eyeballs of the nation were on us. The ears of the nation, they were listening to us. And that let's use this opportunity rightly. And I told him that the effect of governance cannot be understated. It was like in the days, and this is how I explained to him, in the days of Noah, when the flood was coming, teaching people on how to be successful in business, how to marry right, how to raise children correctly, which were all important. But if you had no idea that the flood was on its way, whether you were successful in business or not, whether you were happily married or not, or whether you had problems in your marriage, or you were about to get a divorce, or whether, all right, you were raising your children, did not matter. The flood carried the right man and the wrong man. The flood carried every single person away. And then I cited to him, I said, listen, this was around 2011. I said to him, listen, if we don't begin to speak to the national polity, if we don't use this opportunity we have to create this national discourse, something might begin to emerge in this nation that whether you are successful in business or not, whether you know your accounting principles or not, you will be engulfed by it. I said, so it's important that we redirect this, which is the way it was evolving, that let us sit down with that. And I did explain to him that we'll create seminars for entrepreneurs. We'll create smaller seminars, which we do. And you'll see some of them promoted or talk about it during this course on television broadcast. We'll do all of that. But that there was something important about the nation. And the reason why I got that wasn't because I was being prophetic. In other words, I looked into a crystal ball. But because I had read and I discovered certain things about nation building and its importance. And I just read some of the material. I've said this in previous platforms, right? But I think it's important I say this now. And I said to him, look, I read this somewhere. And this is a book by Charles Kramer. He's somebody that, you know, he's dead now, about 3 years ago. He was a psychiatrist, a consultant who became a political journalist. And so he wanted to write a book on that there is more to life than politics, because he had spent all his life writing about politics. And then he concluded and said, in the end I couldn't, for a simple reason. The same reason I left psychiatry for journalism. While science, medicine, art, poetry, architecture, chess, space, sports, all right, promise elegance, promise purity, and sometimes even sometimes they are fundamentally subordinate. In the end, they must all bow to the sovereignty of politics. Politics, the crooked timber of our communal life, dominates everything. Because in the end, everything high and low, and most especially high, lives or dies by politics. You can have the most advanced of all cultures, get your politics wrong, however, and everything stands to be swept away. Then he said, this is not ancient history. This is Germany, 1933. But even the Celts, he said this, poets, romantic, early 19th century man, oblivious to the horrors of the century to come, kept quotational distance from such blissful innocence. Turns out we need to know one more thing on this earth, politics, because of its capacity, when benign, to allow all things around it to flourish, and its capacity, when destructive, everything around it will wither. He went on and said, politics is the moat, the walls beyond which lie the barbarians. Think about that. Fail to keep them at bay, and everything burns. The entire 20th century, with its mass political enthusiasm, is a lesson in the supreme power of politics to produce ever-expanding circles of ruin. Hear what he said, his next thing he said. World War I not only killed more people than any previous war. The psychological shock of Europe's senseless, self-inflicted devastation forever changed Western sensibilities, practically overthrowing the classical arts, virtues, and modes of thought. The Russian Revolution and its imitators, Chinese, Cuban, Cambodian, tried to atomize society so thoroughly to war against the mediating structures that stand between the individual and the state, that the most basic bonds, hear what he said, of family, faith, fellowship, and conscience came to near dissolution. Of course, the greatest demonstration of the finality of politics is the Holocaust, which in less than a decade destroyed a millennium-old civilization, sweeping away not only 6 million souls, but the institutions, the culture, the very tongue of the now vanished world of European Jews. The only power, he said, comparably destructive, as he said here in his writings, belonged to God or nature. Or if, like Jefferson, you cannot quite decide, nature's God. Santorini was a thriving island civilization in the Mediterranean until one morning, 3,500 years ago, it simply fell into the sea. An earthquake, a volcanic eruption, the end. And yet, hear what he said, even God cannot match the cruelty of his creation. In other words, when people go into cruelty there, he says you cannot. Nature can do what evil in men can do. For every Santorini, there are hundreds of massacres of innocents, and that is the work of man, particularly the work of politics, of groups of men organized to gain and to exercise power, is what he said. So I told this friend, we will hold those entrepreneur and work-based strategic meetings at seminar level, and we will invite great minds to speak, and you'll be inspired. But with the platform, we have to talk about the nation. So we began, and that's where the pivot came, to invite minds to speak on policies. But the question kept coming back, is there any change happening with all this talk? In fact, an uncle of mine, if I mention his name, all right, I mean, everybody will know him in Nigeria if we're into the arts. I mean, he's uncle of mine. I invited him. He told me, he said, look, he said, you've been holding this thing. I watch it. He said, but is there any change that is really occurring? This is what he said to me. He said, so I'm going to decline. Now, this is somebody who comes to my house, all right, lives on the same street. In fact, they are the ones who take care of my elderly mother now. Said, look, I will decline on this. Thinking about it deeper, therefore, we had to make a decision. We realized to move the needle we had to now move and address the political elites of the country. We had to talk to the holders of power. And the decision makers have to be engaged. The strategy, therefore, became, we have the intellectuals to speak. Let me repeat that the speakers will be the intellectuals, and then have an interactive session with holders of power to begin to push, where we take the content of what we have spoken about and then publicly engage holders of power. It's not that Nigerians are not bright or intelligent. Our society is not a reflection of our intellectual content and capacity. Nigerians are some of the most intellectually able people in the world. The problem is the lack of political will to drive the change. If there is no real engagement with the elites to build the political will to do things, then we will be left with masses of people who will feel trapped. And to say the least, that is now becomes dangerous. I'll tell you two stories here, personal stories. Just when we're preparing for this platform, the person who does the voiceover, I called him and I said, so I called him in the evening and I said, have you done it? He said, I don't want to tell you, Pastor. He said, when you called, robbers had just left our house and they held me and my entire family, all right, with their weapons. But he told me something that struck me deep. He said they took everything. He said then they saw a loaf of bread, and out of hunger, they took and stole a loaf of bread. He said, my heart moved to compassion for them, that Nigerians, he told me this, are really hungry. The danger, again, is this. Somebody who is in this auditorium today spoke to me. We were having a meeting, and somebody hit his car from the back. And so later on, I asked him, I said, so he was talking, he said, look, Pastor, there's a problem. I said, what's the issue? He said, my car was hit, which was a Jeep. He said, the people that gathered to come and resolve the matter, These were their words. No be our money you take by the jeep. I beg, make you let them go. Now, this is somebody who had never worked in public sector. This is somebody who works in the banking sector. But as far as the people were concerned, anybody who was driving anything beyond the ordinary, you actually took it. And therefore, they feel that those things may rightfully be their own. If we stretch that further than this, then what happens is, if we don't address this issue, it's left to our imagination. So we needed to engage with people in Nigeria. This was a conclusion in different parts. Because what affects one part will ultimately affect all. We have seen even this on a global level. When we heard of the outbreak of a virus far away in Wuhan, we felt as we watched the television that it was a Chinese problem only, all right? A Chinese problem only, and continued with our lives until it came to our doorstep and changed everything. What affects one part of this nation will soon become everybody's problem if we don't start engaging. The alternative to engagement is force. But we've got to understand this, because man only acts either being persuaded or being coerced. It will be immoral, and let me say this to the elites, to advocate for violence when you have a foreign visa on your own passport. The theater to exit the nation, and the theater if anything happens. A war is something you can only determine when it starts. You cannot determine when it ends. You can be in it for 30 years. You may run away from that theater, but the poor that you claim that you are fighting for will be the ones that will be left fighting, will be the ones that will be left suffering. You may run, but remember, elderly people will be left in that theater. People who are weak. You will have family members that will be left behind. And if history, recent history has taught us anything, even if you win a conventional war, all right, a war can continue in non-conventional ways, and there will still be no peace. Leadership defines itself in its ability to see beyond and to know the unintended consequence of things that others may overlook. To engage those things early and to engage them where they are. Nigeria, in closing, is a religious country. And we pray. We have been praying for decades. The truth is, God is not hard of hearing. I believe he has heard, and God has answered our prayers. But the issue is he's waiting for us to engage. When Moses prayed unto God and cried at the Red Sea, God answered and said, "Why criest thou unto me? Tell the people to go forward. Tell them to get engaged." God himself at the beginning, you could talk about where we will prophesy, declared, "Let us create man in our own image and after our own likeness." But after he had made those pronouncements, he still had to come down to the earth and come and mold man from the dust of the ground with his hands. In other words, he had to get, in quote now, his hands dirty to get the job done. The truth is, progressive forces in a society will always win, provided they get engaged. The problem with progressive tendencies is to evolve into a Puritan posture and then causes them to stand aloof, and retrogression begins to enter in. It is clear the way we are going about, things are going in this nation, things must change. We cannot keep doing things the same way and expect any significant change. And that is why, all right, we have evolved the platform into something where we believe will be broken into two parts. We will have people that will speak on issues that have to do with policy, on intellectual things. And then we will engage, all right, with people that we believe and push in that persuasive way to bring about the needed change that we feel should be done. If anybody has better ideas on how to bring about significant change, then they can let us know and we will implement it. But as far as we can see presently, this is the way we feel and know to begin to shift the needle in terms of conversations. I met with somebody one day who told me, and I'll close with this. He said, "You don't know what the platform is doing." And I said, "Why?" He was a former governor. He said, "I saw a friend, a sitting governor back then at the Transcorp." He said, "Where are all your protocol? Where are all your protocol officers?" He said, the man laughed. "After what you said at platform, how can we behave in this way? You have spoiled everything." And that shows. And so we felt that when we get feedback like this, that we do have a platform, in quotes now, that we can use to engage and bring about, because without significant engagement, you are left with only one alternative. May God bless you, and may God bless Nigeria.
Thank you, Pastor Poju. Wow. I just kept on nodding and squinting. Thank you, Pastor, for that, providing perspective on the platform and also answering questions asked and unasked.